All right. Here we are. We're live. This is Radical Self-Respect with Jared Mello. Today, I have a special guest, Melissa Diller. She's the owner-operator of Drama Kids, and I think she's got a really cool story. But besides having a cool story, she's just a great person, has a wonderful energy that always shines through whenever I speak to her. And I think it's good. It's good in particular right now for the people in the manosphere. I don't think they get to see too many women that they look up to or that really respect. They focus on the not so good, and I don't think that's good either. So, but that's one of the reasons why I have Melissa on here today. So, how are you today, Melissa?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Jared.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So I guess let's start with the beginning here, where you were working for Verizon. And what were you doing for Verizon all those many moons ago?
Yeah, Jared, I'm so glad that you asked me to come on and talk about this because I keep reading articles about the Great Resignation, and even people very close to me have been leaving careers and companies they've been with for 15 plus years. So it's a very good time for people to hear somebody's success story because it can be very scary to leave corporate America and a company that you've known for so long. But I started with Verizon pretty much right out of college in 2006, 2005, 2006. And I did a variety of jobs with Verizon. I started out in sales, and then I worked my way into network engineering. And then at the end of my career with Verizon, I was an internal events planner and marketing communicator. So I had a very fun job. I got to plan all the internal events for the employees, all the internal parties, and I really loved it. But I had a calling to teach drama to kids. And I started it on the side in about 2016 while I was still working at Verizon. And that was a very tough time because at Verizon, our team motto was, we work can till can't. So I would go in when it was dark and leave when it was dark. And some weeks I would work 6 days a week. So I worked a lot of hours. And when I started the business, I had to work any time that I could on the business as well. So there was about a 6-month period where I was doing both, and it was nonstop work, but it was all stuff I loved. So it didn't feel like that to me. But, my husband and my family members sat me down and said, like, you can't sustain this. You've got to choose. And that was really scary.
So when you were with Verizon, you're basically kind of almost an event planner, party planner with Verizon, and you started with sales. And their motto was, can until you can't?
Yes, sir. That was our motto, our team motto.
That sounds like a great way to burn out.
It really was. And the company was making all these changes. We had a team of about 30 people in our operations group, and they started laying people off. And I got, pulled into the office, and I was hoping that I was going to get a package at that time because I had already started Drama Kids on the side. And they said, you're one of the lucky ones. You're one of the 5 that are going to stay. And looking back, I know it was because I worked so hard. So if they're going to go from about 30 people working in and out of this operations down to 5, they're going to pick the hardest working people. And I was like, oh, thanks. And I see so many companies doing that to people nowadays. Just laying people off and then giving all that extra workload to their current staff. And people are just burnt out. They're done.
I hear that story a lot where they'll lay off the higher paid employees a lot of times and try to save and get a lower paid person to do their work plus that person's work. It sounds like a recipe for disaster to me. Like, I'm big into, if you have a business, invest in your people. Treat them well. When they feel like they're appreciated, they're more likely to do more than what's expected, as opposed to feeling like they're taken advantage of. Then they're probably going to want to do the bare minimum. But I wanted to ask you about, how did you just discover that for yourself, that Drama Kids was your calling? Like, what was that process like? How did you first discover it?
So there was a time period in my life where I did a lot of community theater and was on boards of community theaters. And through there, I got the opportunity to volunteer teach kids drama. And it was so rewarding because acting is actually one of the top healing modalities.
I did not know that.
Okay, so if you've ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel. Okay, you have? Yeah.
I've heard of the book. I haven't read it yet, though. I should get it.
Highly recommend it. He talks about the top 5 things to do to heal, and one of them is acting and drama, and the other is yoga, which I teach both. So back to your question of how I knew that was my thing, I really missed teaching the kids because I had moved for Verizon, my location. I was now living in a new state and city, and I didn't have those connections. So I really wanted to get back to the root of that in a volunteer capacity that blew up and turned into a business. But the way I found that was something I was really missing was through yoga. I went through a yoga teacher training program to learn how to teach yoga because I wanted to learn how to practice yoga on my own. And that process was life-changing. When you go through a teacher training program, a good teacher training program, you are forced to look inward. And a lot of answers come to you. And that was one thing that just kept coming up that I really missed that.
Yoga is really tough. I haven't done some yoga for a little while, but what I remember distinctly about yoga was it was making me focus on the fact that, like, when I was working out, it was coming more of like from a burning of anger as opposed to a peaceful process. That's what I noticed. I had to do some of it for school. And while you were talking, I really remembered why I heard The Body Keeps the Score. I think it was a holistic psychologist, Nicole LaPera. I think she mentioned it in her book, and that's where I heard of it from. Did she mention things like the vagus nerve, I think it's called? Things like that?
Yes. I love the holistic psychologist. I also have her book. It's phenomenal. And the vagus nerve is accessed when you're doing breath work. And yoga, there's 8 limbs to yoga. Most people think it's just going to the gym and doing the poses and the movements. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. There are multiple limbs, practices, and one of them is breath work. And when you do breath work, proper belly breathing, you access the vagus nerve, which ignites the relaxation in the body. It calms the central nervous system. And you can use that waiting in line, in the car when someone cuts you off, or in the office if your boss is kind of nagging you or something. So it's something you can use and nobody even knows you're doing it.
So how would you do that for those of us who are curious?
How do you do a deep breath?
Well, yeah, what's the proper way? Because it sounds like it should be simple, but I have a feeling it's probably not.
It really is actually simple, and I can walk you through that right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So go ahead and sit up nice and tall or stand up nice and tall, basically because you want to have your lung capacity open so you can get some breath in there. And begin to inhale in through the nose and let the breath come down through the throat. Relax your shoulders. Yes. And keep sipping that breath. Let it come in through the upper chest and keep pressing it down towards the rib cage and then down towards the belly, and let your belly inflate like a balloon, which is kind of counterculture to what we try to do every day. And then slowly begin to exhale the way you came in, up through the upper chest, out through the throat, and out through the nose or the mouth. And we're just going to do that about 2 more times. Go ahead. Take a big inhale. Relaxing the shoulders. Keep sipping it up and press it down, all the way down to the belly, so that now it comes around to the sides of the low back and you can feel your entire torso inflating. And then slowly, once again, with control, begin to exhale either through the nose or the mouth. And notice as you exhale, maybe your shoulders and your back soften just a little bit more. We're just going to do one more because you want to do it a couple times. Inhale.
Requires a lot of focus. Like
Yes, it does.
Mindfulness, I guess, is what we'll call it too. Gets you in the present.
Yes, that's exactly what it does. So inhale in through the nose, let it come down through the throat, into the upper chest. Keep pressing it down into the rib cage, into the belly, into the sides of the body, the low back. Hold it for just a moment, and now begin to exhale. This time when you exhale, see if you can make your exhale longer than your inhale. As you just keep exhaling, even when you think you can't, and draw that belly button in and up. So do you feel just a little bit relaxed?
It requires me to focus a lot because I think I'm more used to shallow breathing. And it's probably a good skill, especially when you're swimming or running and doing any other aerobic exercises, that it could probably really help your lung capacity as you go. But I'm not used to doing that, so I'm the kind of person that I stink at things when I don't know how to do them. I'm terrible being a beginner, which I also learned that's the reason why a lot of people don't like to try new things, because they don't want to look bad in front of others. And so it prevents them from trying new things. But I've been trying to do this thing where I'm okay looking bad in front of others. I'm okay not knowing the answers in front of others. And I think it helps us grow when we do that.
Jared,
I can't do that.
Yeah,
I need to practice that.
Good. I hope you do. You can practice it in the car when you're driving. You can practice it in between meetings. It just resets your vibe, your energy. Yeah, most people just chest breathe. And we're not, yeah, and that is actually mirroring like a anxious, that is cultivating anxiety in people if we're just chest breathing. It mirrors a panic attack. So we want to consciously take time each day to do a couple belly breaths. We're not going to do a belly breath all day long. That's not how our bodies were designed. But when we do that, our body then knows and will go back to that as needed.
It's kind of like a meditation too, I feel like, where it forces you to really focus. And people who have anxiety, like a lot of people have anxiety right here in their chest. Mm-hmm. Do you have any suggestions for people like that struggle with that?
Yes, those deep belly breaths will calm them down, calm their central nervous system. Those short, shallow breaths, they create more panic and can induce a panic attack. So being very mindful, taking those deep belly breaths is definitely going to relax anybody experiencing anxiety.
Good, because there's no shortage of that right now too. I feel like we're in an epidemic of a lot of things. Anxiety and depression, I feel like, is one of them. And this is a good thing to ask you too, I think social media contributes to a lot of people's, I don't know, negativity maybe, or comparisons. What are your recommendations about like dealing with social media?
So I've actually been trying to stay off social media more than ever. With a business, it's difficult to do that. So I have hired people because I was making the excuse, well, I own a business, so I have to be on social media. And I'm like, that is not really true. And it's more beneficial for my mind to hire somebody else to handle my business social media site than it is for me to be on there and end up drowning in the craziness. I've taken all the social media off of my phones. It's only on my laptop. So I'll still go in at the end of the day. Yeah. And just check, like, did I get a message from a client, and also check in with friends and family from afar that are on social media. But I have very limited my social media lately because it was getting me very anxious just seeing different things.
Now, are you like me, where I have my own social media checking that I do every morning, where I have like the same loop of things that I check, and I'm trying to break that habit. I feel like the less places I bring my phone with me, the better. And I've heard before, like, pay attention to the things you're doing when you don't feel like checking your phone. Those are probably things you should be doing more of. And for me, it's just it's a powerful thing, our phones. I think a lot of us don't really respect the power we have in this device, considering all of history. All of history, we have all the information in the world at our fingertips that I think a lot of people really just take it for granted, and we forget what a almost a magical thing that it is. The problem is it also comes with all these other negatives, where the social media platforms, they program it so that it becomes the most addicting as possible, right? And when the people in Silicon Valley, they tell their secretaries and assistants, don't let me go on this for this amount of time, because they know that, I don't even think they know what the negative effects are completely. This is relatively new. This is all within 10 years old. So it's crazy.
It's extremely addicting. And we have a culture where we're not looking at our emotions and our feelings, and we're utilizing other things to not look at those things. And the cell phone has made it even more dangerous. I was just read somewhere, someone said that they started holding a crystal in their hand to replace their cell phone, because you just think about just holding the cell phone in your hand and how addicting that is. Just play with that idea. Because when I read that, I was like, really? And I was like, oh yeah. So just putting something else in your hand instead of the cell phone, like you said, you're trying not to pick up your cell phone as much, is helpful, because it is very addicting. And we are basically computer programs, whether we realize it or not. And our brains can very easily be manipulated. And
Sure.
yeah, and they are being all the time with social media.
So did you go through a period of anxiousness when you stopped picking up your phone as much? Because I know that can be my feeling, where my phone's not right in my pocket. And I wonder to myself, how the hell did I live before cell phones came around? But you and I are both old enough to have lived the majority of our lives without them. But now it seems so mandatory. But it really is. It really shouldn't be that mandatory.
Yeah. So what really opened my eyes to my cell phone, I used all these excuses of I'm a business owner, I can't miss any calls, and those are all excuses. And when I had a baby this past year, and I want to be as present for him as I can, and that's when I was like, this phone needs to go, because I can't be checking it every 2 seconds. I need to be eyeball to eyeball with this child.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. And I want to circle back here too. When you took the leap away from Verizon, what helped you with that? Because I think a lot of people, they're very scared to take that final step to actually leave. So maybe you could walk us through what that was like for you.
I would love to, because I had so many limiting beliefs that I didn't even realize. We need coaches. And Jared, I know you're a coach, so people, they may need to hire you for that. You need coaches or therapists or somebody that can show you your limiting beliefs. I was the breadwinner of my family at that time when I jumped. And even with that, my husband was so supportive. So you definitely need supportive people. He was like, jump. He would send me videos of just famous people talking about jumping. The guy who used to host Family Feud, what was his name?
Family Feud. I don't know.
Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey.
Okay. Yep.
So he has an amazing video on YouTube about jumping. Okay. Everyone should watch it. He has a phenomenal story about jumping from his regular everyday career to the, multimillionaire that he is today. And my husband sent that to me, and it was really the most supportive thing ever. He was like, just do it. Because I had for over 6 months been doing both jobs, and he was like, you just need to follow your heart and go. My boss was supportive. She still held our weekly meetings with me, even after I left, for months.
That's cool of her, though.
It was. And it really is important to have someone to keep you straight when you leave, whether it's a friend that you talk to each week or a family member, just to report in what you've been doing. Because once you're on your own, you're on your own. So I met with a bunch of local business owners as well, female business owners, because I wanted to know what their journey was like, because it was going to be similar to mine. Also, women who own businesses in similar categories working with kids. And I interviewed them pages. I paid for their lunch or coffee and would ask them tons of questions before I left. And these are all the things that I did to get that courage to leave. And one of the business owners, I remember she told me, when you leave, still get up every day at the same time and get dressed like you're going to work. And that was one of the best.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was the best piece of advice ever, because you can become very ungrounded once you leave because you are in charge of your own schedule. But it is the most rewarding thing. I was scared that we weren't going to have enough money, that we were going to all these things. Nothing bad ever happened. Like when you work for yourself, you can decide how much you're going to charge. You can decide how many hours you're going to work. And you're much more in control than the facade of corporate America seems to be. Right. Corporate America really isn't safe at all.
Yeah, you're right about that. People trick people into thinking it's safe when in reality, you could be maybe even more likely to be laid off from one of those kinds of things when they get downsized or something with COVID happens. Who knows?
And those things can happen out of nowhere. And when you're running your own business, you're looking at your books, you can see what's happening, you can prepare. When you're working for somebody else, you can't prepare for what they're going to pull out of their back pocket tomorrow, whether it's eliminating your entire department. Funny story, the job that I was doing, that was, I was one of the people that was kept and blah, 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 blah. 2 years after I left, they closed the entire building down. It was a headquarters building. So that's not anything you would have ever expected. My position was completely eliminated. So
it's a good thing you made the jump when you did.
That's the thing. We have to listen to our inner voice. It's always giving us messages, your higher power, whatever that is for you. And the only way that you can hear it is through things like breath work, meditation, and yoga. When you're quiet, your inner voice will speak to you your truth, and then you have to be brave enough to listen, but it will always catch you. It will always take care of you.
I can see that. Now, once you made the leap and now you're at Drama Kids, now what is your process like when you do Drama Kids? How do you go about it?
Well, I was thinking about that this morning. I love taking my mornings slow. So I get up and this is part of my work schedule. It's non-negotiable that I will get up and I will walk every single morning. And that's my meditation. It's a walking meditation where I'm using all 5 of my senses to get grounded in the here and now. So I'm listening, I'm feeling the air, I'm smelling the trees, all the senses on this walk. So I'm getting exercise, but that's not really my goal. My goal is to get grounded. And then, and if I don't do that morning meditation walk, it gets me out of, it's not good.
I have something similar that I do.
Cool. Yeah. Everybody needs their wake up start button. Everybody needs to find what it is for them. And then I come back and I juice celery. Straight celery juice I drink. That's the first thing I drink every day. Even the baby does.
I said steroids. That's what they call steroids too.
Oh.
No, you're not doing steroids.
It gives me lots of energy. Like I imagine steroids would. And then I do all my juicing and get my body fueled for the day. And then I do all my administrative work in the early mornings, like around this time, because this is when I'm freshest. And then all my teaching is in the early afternoons and evenings.
Okay, that's cool. Now, when you're doing Drama Kids now, have you ever felt like giving up? Have you thought like, uh-oh, this isn't going the way I thought it would? Maybe you could walk us through some of your mindset with that when that was going on.
Yeah. So, yes, owning a business is like a relationship, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, or girlfriend relationship. You have this relationship with this being, this entity that is your business. And there are so many times that you want to give up and walk away, but it's just like a marriage. You make the commitment and you stick with it. So I got that from another woman business owner who said like she's had a real tough run with her business and the relationship, and she's wanted to break up with it. And Yeah, and then loved it so much. And that is exactly my experience with owning a business as well. There have been times when I put the business up for sale too, because I've just been like, yeah,
I didn't know that.
I know. There's probably a lot of people that don't know that. And then, people will come and try to buy it, but they don't have the heart. So I will say no.
That's
And
good though.
yeah.
Like your baby, you don't want to just give it to anybody.
Yeah. And people don't understand, I wouldn't say like at Verizon, I worked a lot of hours, right? The Kental can't. In a business, you have to be able to get dirty. And what I mean by that is you have to want to do every single role when you own a business. You're the last person. If someone calls out, if you lose an employee, you're doing that role, And especially when you're starting out, for the first year, it was just me. I could have hired an employee, but it was just me. And I think that was good because then I got to really understand all the facets of my my business. And so you have to want to do every single role. And I get bored very easily. So being HR, being the teacher, being the secretary who answers the phone, being the person who does all the accounting, all that stuff is very exciting to me. So I don't get bored.
I think it helps you a lot that your heart's in it too. And if you didn't really love what you were doing, it'd be much harder to do the stuff that you're doing. It's much harder to put in the effort and do all the roles. And, back to your Verizon slogan there, I think that's my new least favorite slogan of all, can until can't. Now, here's the thing. They have, what they're actually asking with that, right, is they want people to have a founder's mentality for Verizon, which who's really going to have that? Now, they were lucky with you, though, that you liked your position as much as you did, so they got lucky with you. But for a lot of people, they're not going to have that kind of buy-in. But when you have your own thing, you do have that buy-in. You have the founder's mentality, right? And so it helps you to push through, helps you to keep on going when it might feel like, oh, I need to sell this now. But no, it's yours. You created it, so you kind of feel a sense of responsibility for it.
Here's something interesting that you just made me think of with what you were saying. So I also had this limiting belief that I didn't realize that I was bad. And I think it was because when I was a kid, I did things outside the box that, some parents and teachers and things would consider bad. So, I heard that a lot. But what I uncovered with a coach, so I really hope some of these people come work with you, is that I'm actually very creative. And I didn't stay within society's norms. And that's when I was labeled bad by other people because it would freak them out that I was not staying within the box. And to own a business, and Jared, I think you're familiar with this, you have to be outside the box. And this is my slogan, throw spaghetti on the wall. And so that's my new slogan. And I
like that one. That's good.
Yeah. And that's how it's been since I started a business. So I can't stay married to one particular way of doing my business because my business should be evolving and so should I. So for example, this business is typically designed to take place in schools. Well, since COVID has hit, no schools are allowing anybody inside the schools, right? So what am I going to do, right? No big deal, Jared. No big deal because I throw spaghetti on the wall. So I held online classes that were successful. Then I started holding classes outside at parks all throughout.
That's using the old noggin.
Right? And we had huge enrollments. The kids loved it. They loved being outside and they were also getting fun, safe socialization. So I've had parents that are going through cancer, getting chemo, and they're enrolling their kids in our outdoor program because their kids are socially outside, getting safe, fun experiences, not opening themselves up to whatever is going on in the world at this moment.
The parents were probably blessed to have that when a lot of times, I guess they had multiple kids in the house, all being homeschooled. And if they can do that, a program with you, that'd probably help with some of the stress with that. The other socialization, just getting them outside, hanging out with other people, that's huge too. So that's all spectacular.
And that's just one little example of what I mean by throwing spaghetti on the wall. I was talking with another business owner the other day, and I could tell she was her mind was not open to outside ideas. And that's why it's so important that you work with other people so that they can get your mind fluid again. We get stuck in patterns, and there's always a way to do something. Always.
I can see that. Well, I think it's people can't spot self-deception by definition, right? You got to have someone else to do that. And when you were talking about before, when people were labeling you as bad, to me, it always reminds me of people, they'll get upset when you go against the norms, but they're really just giving you their own limitations and not yours. And that was a big one for me to remember, because the people who were doing that with me, they didn't want to do it themselves. They wanted me to conform. And it wasn't anything to do with me. It was all about them. It was about, okay, yeah, I'm doing this way of life, so I'll feel more comfortable if you also do this way of life. Because they know deep down that, I think it's almost envy, but not quite, where they see you as, uh-oh, if he goes that route and it actually works, he could go way up here. I can't have that. So, but if he comes with me, he'll only get as far as I do. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that they want to see you do well, as long as it's not better than them.
So it's like this is what I think happens is that, and it happens to me too. We feel threatened. Our limiting beliefs, which make up our ego, get threatened. And this is, I'm kind of going to go weird here, and you can stop my conversation. Okay, so we talked about the holistic psychologist. And she came out that she's in a throuple relationship.
I saw that.
Okay, so I was very triggered by that, and so So I meditated about it, and I realized, and I didn't react. I didn't post anything to her or unfollow her or anything. I was just like, okay, for some reason, it's making me feel some sort of way. And what I realized was it was threatening my lifestyle. It was threatening my way of being. I am in a 2-person relationship, a man and a woman. And, if these throuple things become socially accepted, which
the first time I heard the term is when I saw her Instagram. I never even heard of it before, throuple. But I bet you it triggered you even more because she's someone you look up to. And she's someone that is pretty brilliant in a lot of ways. And so then when she goes there and does that, I think she had to know she was going to get a little backlash. But it did upset her, I saw, because she was posting how she lost all sorts of followers from doing that. But I also heard people sharing exactly what you were sharing about it, where they were triggered at first, but then they kind of worked through it, processed it, and then it was fine.
Yeah, because it threatens our way of being. So like if you go out on your own, Jared, and you're not in corporate America and I'm miserable in corporate America, you threaten my limiting belief that I have to be in corporate America. And that makes me have to look at myself, and I don't want to have to look at myself. Right. We don't want to have to look at our crap.
Right. And but that's the thing, though. They'd rather, as opposed to working on it themselves, they'd rather just discourage in other people, which is, it's unfortunate that it is that way a lot of times, but I think when we understand where other people are coming from and we understand, okay, this is probably why they're doing that, it becomes easier not to be angry by it. It becomes easier not to be triggered by it. And so with the holistic psychologist there, I've never seen such a thing before, but I'm all about, if it's going to work for them, it's going to work for them. I could see 1,000 ways it might not work for them, but as long as it works for now, I'm fine.
Yeah. And it's kind of like that labeling of that's bad because it's outside of our norms. One of the big things I hear about people saying they can't leave corporate America is insurance. And so I do want to touch on that because there are tons of insurance opportunities that are way cheaper than what corporate America is offering us. But that, again, is a limiting belief that's been drowned into our heads. So we have to push it out of the way and look, we do not, my husband and I and my baby don't have insurance through any corporate position. Both of us own our own businesses, and we have insurance that's better than the insurance we had when we worked with corporate America, and it's cheaper. It's a co-op. And so there's tons of insurance opportunities out there. You just have to take the time to look. It wasn't easy. It was a pain in the behind, but don't let that be one of your limiting beliefs from stopping you to follow your dreams too.
So what do you mean a co-op? How does that work?
Okay, so it's like a group of strangers who there's a team of people that manage it, but they created an insurance policy. And because we all did it together as if we were a corporation, it's so much cheaper.
Okay. I
Yeah.
don't think people even know that existed.
Yes. See, Jared, they keep that out of, the mainstream media because that will then, like, a lot of people think they're stuck in corporate America for that reason alone.
Right. And so you had to find people that were to be a part of the co-op with you, or is there like some
No.
forums that you went to?
There's an agent. There's agents for different co-ops. And so, like, if you are in a local business chamber or something like that, ask around or join, better yet, if you're probably not joined in one, if you don't own your business yet, join a local, like a women's influencer, if you're a woman, business group or a networking group. And typically there'll be someone who does that, who offers those sorts of things, insurance of some capacity. And so that is their job, and they find all the people and gather us together. It can be a little difficult if you have some pre-existing conditions, but you can always go with what they call, the slang term is the Obamacare stuff.
Okay.
Those plans aren't as good as what I'm talking about. But if you don't have any pre-existing conditions and you take good care of yourself, it's very easy to get into one of these co-ops.
Well, I'm glad you addressed that because that's a huge sticking point, especially for people that have families and kids. They don't want to leave their great health insurance plan, or as you say, maybe not even as great as they think it is, but they're scared. They're scared to take that leap because what happens if there's going to be some sort of catastrophe? They want to make sure their family's protected, but I'm glad you shared that there because I think that's going to help a lot of people. Now, you'd also mentioned a relationship a couple times here. I want to get into that a little bit because I do think there's a lot of people struggling with relationships. And I always remember something you said that I think a marriage counselor or a therapist said to you about how any two people can make a relationship work as long as they're both willing. Any two people.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because it's not about, you didn't say anything about connection. You didn't say anything about, oh, this is a soulmate or this is this. It's like, no, any two people that are willing can make something work. So how long have you been with your husband now?
Oh, we've been together for like 15 years. We got together in the end of 2006. So yeah, it's been a long time, and it's obviously been my longest relationship. And marriage isn't easy. It's like owning the business. Nothing is ever easy. And what I realized is anytime anything comes up, I need to look at myself. It never, ever has to do with the other person. It always has to do with me and my own bullcrap being projected onto that person. And I think the key to us being together for so long is that we are both extremely supportive of each other and each other following our dreams. And we have been since day one. Just like, what was your dream that you always wanted to do? We would talk about that. And then we would be like, well, we both need to go do that. For example, his was always to be a police officer. So I went and found where he could be a police officer, volunteer, but have all the capabilities as a police officer. And it's called a reserves police officer. So he's been a reserves police officer for years now. He has all the capabilities of a full-time paid police officer, but he's volunteer so that he can do it in his own schedule.
I didn't even know you could do that.
I know, right? And so that's been incredible for him and his, finding himself. And then when we met, he was like, what did you always want to be? And I was like, an actress. And he was like, well, you need to go do that. And I was like, I think I'm too old now. And I was in my 20s. And he was like, no. So I went and I got an agent and I started professionally acting. And it was because
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah. He was like, you need to go do that. And I was like, okay. And I went and auditioned, and it was the end of that. So we really support each other. Just in the past year, he left his corporate job he always had a part-time business. I think everybody should always have their fingers in different things. And his corporate job really got out of control. He had over 25 employees reporting to him. And it was just, they were really taking advantage of him. So he was like, I'm going to leave and just grow my part-time business into a full-time job. And I was like, yeah. And was it scary? Yes. But am I going to let my limiting beliefs hold him back from his dreams and from him being happy? No, that is not fair. And that's when marriages start to crumble, when we allow our limiting beliefs to hold our spouses and our friendships back.
So it sounds like you're both just good teammates for one another. You support
Yes.
one another, and you have a little self-awareness so you can know when, okay, maybe this is just my crap here, and he knows the same about himself. What kind of suggestions would you give to people that are like single right now, or that are maybe struggling?
Yeah, so I think that if you are struggling and if you are single, our healing takes place in relationships, and that is the honest truth. You can't heal alone.
No,
So,
that's pause, because that's different than what you hear a lot there. Where on one hand, I think you do got to be good on your own before you get into a relationship, or you might be more likely to be codependent or have some form of unhealthy attachment. I still think that part's true. But what do you mean by what you're saying?
okay, so I don't even mean, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. So let's say you're single.
Okay.
I would recommend like fostering, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship. And what I mean by our healing takes place in relationships is I'll even use one of my good girlfriends as relationship who were not romantically involved at all. I'm not in a throuple. So she does a lot of work on herself and I do a lot of work on myself. And she said something that had hurt my feelings. And instead of doing what my usual pattern of not saying something and then having resentment, because I was always fearful then that I would make someone upset and then they wouldn't want to be my friend or be in a relationship with me anymore, I kindly said, oh, you know what? That really hurt my feelings. And that's not attacking the person, right? And that takes a lot of work to not say, you just said this and you blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I need to have that relationship with someone to be able to say, to practice those things, to say, oh, that really just hurt my feelings. And even if you don't know why, because that's what I said to her, I said, I don't know why, but what you just said hurt my feelings so bad. And she goes, you know what? I'm so sorry that I said that. And we were like totally fine. And after that, because we had that awesome conversation and because she meditates and I meditate, we came back together later and she goes, you know, this thing that you got an opportunity to do really triggered me and it made me realize that I want to do what you're doing too. So she went out and got a volunteer thing doing that thing. And then I realized why it had triggered me and I shared that with her and we were vulnerable and we were able to work together. And that's what I think is the missing piece. I didn't say that it was her fault. I said, I don't know why, but that just really hurt my feelings. Nothing she did is that made me feel hurt is her fault. You know, if I was codependent, then yeah, I would feel like it was her fault that she made me feel that way. No, I need to investigate why I am feeling some sort of way. I need to sit in those emotions instead of stuff them down and then have a very vulnerable, scary conversation knowing she may hate me if I share this with her. And that's okay.
Well, so much of relationships are just two things that so few people seem to be able to do. It's place a boundary in a healthy way and listen to someone else's boundary or feelings in a healthy way. And the majority of relationships that I see go awry with friends, family, or romantically, it's when someone can't do one of those two things. Now, how do you distinguish between, like, say someone's like really being mean or abusive almost, gaslighting type stuff? How would you address a scenario like that? Because that's a common thing. in
Woo!
this day and age.
You're bringing up the tough topics, Jared.
Good.
So I did have an experience in the last, in 2020, in the beginning of 2020, where I was, involved in a relationship and a workplace that was very gaslighting. And I had been sent an email that was, what I deemed inappropriate. And I decided that there was nothing to say that was going to fix this relationship because there wasn't anything that was going to change. I had seen a pattern of people being treated the same way. And so I knew that nothing was going to change, and there was no sense in creating or cultivating any sort of drama or anything of that nature. So I just lovingly told this person that I was going to love them from afar. And there was no war.
How did they react or respond?
They respected that boundary.
Okay, good. Because that's a big one. I know people who may struggle with narcissism, perhaps, they wouldn't be able to hear something like that without attacking. And there are some people out there that they are like that, unfortunately. And I think they often gravitate towards certain kinds of people. But once we get a certain level of assertiveness, then we kind of repel those kinds of people too, which I think is also good. But I know a lot of people on my channel here, they've struggled with relationships that maybe they're with a borderline personality disordered person or a narcissistic person, and they get burned, just like women get burned with narcissistic men too. And so they're really struggling with the same things. But to know how to just move forward through them, like you're talking about, that's huge. And with the least amount of emotional volatility. Because that's another one. There's a lot of reactivity in some of these people. They don't know how to take the step back, or something, they get triggered, or they see the throuple thing like you did. But instead of taking a step back and reflecting, they'll charge into the Instagram comments. How dare you? How dare you to put that on your Instagram page? And then they don't have that gap. And it always reminds me of like Viktor Frankl, where he says between stimulus and response, there's a gap. You got to be able to take the step back before you respond. And so a lot of people don't know how to do that, unfortunately. But I think that's where yoga would help. That breathing stuff would help.
Yes. Yoga, breath work, meditation, any sort of grounding practice, juicing, going for walks, anything that's going to ground us. And when we start working with breath work and meditation, it teaches us to take that pause. And as far as, so I appreciate the titles of people and the labels of people, but in my opinion, I think all of us have a little bit of everything as far as narcissism and whatever else, anxiety, depression. We all have those pieces. This is just my philosophy. There's no truth or backing to this or anything.
Right.
And that they come out with different things that trigger us from our childhood or, just divorces, things that happen in life that cause specific triggers. And the goal and the way to be healthy is to just try and keep them in check and level. So with these techniques like yoga and breath work and grounding, we can not respond within our ego and sit back and recognize our role and our part in every single interaction and relationship.
Yeah, just take responsibility for our side of the street. I agree with that. I certainly agree with that. Now, I think there's two different kinds of people too. There's the kinds of people that are trying to work on themselves, and then there's people that aren't. And for the people who aren't, to me, I tell people there's not much you can do with them, because if they're not going to be willing to take a look at their side of the streets as well, take some personal responsibility, I mean, what's going to change in that scenario?
So I agree, Jared, very much so, that there are people that aren't willing to look at themselves because it is so hard. And I think there's a lot of people that don't even know what we're talking about right now. They don't understand.
Unfortunately, I think you're right.
But I believe that more people are waking up. When I say waking up, which a lot of people are like, what the hell does that mean? looking at themselves and looking
Sure.
at their reactions and their words and the thoughts in their mind and the feelings in their body and the tension in their shoulders, their neck, their hips, wherever they're holding it. These are all the things that Jared and I are talking about, is looking at when somebody says something to you. Do you tense up in a specific part of your body? What was said that made you do that? And what was the feeling that it cultivated? And when was the first time in your life that you felt that feeling? And you might be like, Melissa, how could I remember that? There are tools to be able to link back what feeling was associated the first time that was.
The initial wound.
Yes, the initial wound. Thank you, Jared. Very perfectly said. Yeah.
And so then anything that, I think I read a book, maybe it's Care of the Soul, it might have been, or what was the other one? A guy, Michael Singer, I remember I told you to read one of his books, The Surrender Experiment. There was another one that he wrote too. The Untethered Soul. I can't remember if it was The Untethered Soul or The Care of the Soul. But he mentioned, like, when someone gets bothered, it's because something clanked around in your soul and touched off of something that you didn't quite process fully. And I completely agree with that too. I agree with that. So a lot of these things, it's not about what just happened. It's about an initial wound that hasn't really been healed properly. But so what kind of suggestions do you have for people that are trying to listen to a boundary or trying to place a boundary in a healthy way, as opposed to like being reactive or having the, what's the other word they call it? The pain body activated? What do you do to maybe like work through it and have the humility like you did to say, hey, you know what? I don't know why. That was a good phrasing of it. I don't know why, but this upset me here when you said that. So how do you get to that place?
So Jared, the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, is a perfect example. I recommend everyone read that book. And the first time you read it, because you're going to need to read it every year and multiple times a year, because it's that much, it's that mind-blowing. It talks about the voice in our heads. And some of the folks watching might be like, I don't have a voice in my head. Everyone has a voice in their head. And when we're talking about people being awake, that's what we're talking about. People being awake to the voice in their head. And the voice in your head that you can hear, you can actually listen to, is not you. It's the programming. It's your ego. It's the programming of your teachers, your parents, your classmates, the things that they said to you that hurt your feelings, that cultivated some sort of trigger, or small trauma. I'm not talking capital T traumas. I'm talking, someone said you were fat or something like that. And those are the things that we as human beings need to investigate in ourselves. And it is dirty, and it is not fun, and it is scary, and it is ungrounding. And to look at those things, you need someone to help you along, whether it's a 12-step Al-Anon AA sponsor, a therapist, a life coach. You don't have to have a label. Everybody should be doing this. You don't have to have a label of anxiety or depression to be looking at this stuff. Every single human being at this time needs to be looking at themselves. Are we going to be perfect? No. But I practice every day in the relationships that I have, and I mess up every single day. And my husband is the hardest one to play this game with. Those romantic relationships are the hardest. Sure. And we have to be willing to apologize and say, I fucked up. I'm so sorry. I was just totally out of my mind. And we have to be able to be courageous enough to sit with, why did that fight happen? Because it's never just one person, ever.
I can see that. I know one of the first steps of my spirituality journey was when I was writing on, say, 12 steps from an NA or AA perspective. That opened up my eyes to a lot of different things, because it just gets you to take a look at yourself, and a humble, honest look at yourself about your defects, about your patterns. And when you do that, it opens up something inside of you that maybe you didn't even know existed. But I think that's something that they have it for AA and NA, but I think everyone should probably do it, because it helps everyone, not just them. And actually, people who just have normal issues, they could probably be helped most of all, because if they've never been forced to have that kind of investigation, about themselves, right? And so it's tough for them.
I love that you just brought that up. I would say addiction of some sort can be found in most families. So maybe you have a brother that drinks too much or something like that. Al-Anon, which is a 12-step spiritual program for people who have family members who are addicts. And I put this out there because maybe you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not an addict. Maybe there's someone in your life who is, could be a parent, a grandparent, or a sibling. Al-Anon is a great program to investigate yourself and how you've been affected by those things, because even though we think we haven't, we still are. It is very, very interesting.
So that brings me into two things there, really, where there's like a whole subset of like a lot of things are family oriented, right? Where it starts with the parents, and then oftentimes, especially when there's drugs and alcohol involved, people are playing the role. Like there's the role of the scapegoat, there's a role of the hero, the role of the golden child. And these roles take many different forms, right? They look differently in different families, but they're certainly there. They're certainly there. And I wanted to ask you another thing about like your boundary system. Like when would you decide for yourself that someone should be cut off, for example, where you say, you know what, no contact, this person has crossed too many lines. What's your red flag zone or like no crossing zone for that?
So that's extremely, extremely rare. I mean, even within families, we have, things that happen that aren't right, but do we cut people off? No, those are the relationships where we can grow and heal. So I'm not a big proponent on cutting people off. In fact, I really only had one falling out with a friend that I can recall. And that was the one that happened at the beginning of 2020. And the reason why I decided it was best for me to cut the cord and love that person from afar was because I could count over 25 people in the 3 years that we had been friends that had been treated poorly by this person. But I had stuck my head in the sand. And so I was starting to be treated that way as well. And I had wanted so badly to be liked by everybody that I would stick my head in the sand before and make excuses for the way that I saw this person treating over 25 other people. And so now that I was being truthful with myself, I was able to see that I was being triggered, that being wanted, that feeling of being wanted was being triggered, and I was allowing behavior to happen to me and those around me because I just wanted to be wanted so bad in a part of this community that this person had built and by this person. And when I became secure within myself and uncovered that limiting belief, it no longer mattered. I no longer needed to allow that treatment anymore.
So it sounds like you're a little more tolerant than me, but I've had people that it's really only in small scenarios where, like, I used to be a very codependent person. And so when you grow up being that way, people get used to you being that way. And so then as time goes on, you grow, you change. There are some people out there that don't like it very much, where if you've been the doormat before, you've been the people pleaser before, they want you to remain that person. And then when you decide, no, that's not going to be who I am anymore, sometimes people do not like that very much at all. So my rule for myself is, if I have a boundary with someone and they just choose to gaslight, try to, like, the stereotypical narcissistic behavior. Now, like you said, I do agree. Everyone does have narcissistic traits. Everyone does have maybe borderline traits, but for some people, it goes off the deep end. I also think that too. And so they don't know how. They just don't. They all react. And they just try to flip things back on you and hurt. And then even sometimes it gets tricky where they'll try to come back and say they're sorry. And then you got to wonder, okay, if I forgive him, will my 30 years of experience with this person be how it is? Or will he change? Because especially in family, if they've done these things and it's just been that way your whole life, it's like, I don't trust them as much to change at this point, especially when there's a long pattern of behavior where they've been that way their whole lives. And so loving from afar, I think, is good. But also in my own personal life, I think for one person in particular, I will probably have to see this person again. But I like to be what I call gaslighting proof, where if someone's really bothering me so much, like you said, there's something also going on with me, even regardless of how abusive he's being, like minus physical abuse and like sexual abuse. It's like if you're saying words, there's something going on in me that's being triggered, and I got to work on that. I got to become gaslighting proof. Like that's my phrase for it. And if I become gaslighting proof, then nothing they can say will have power over me anymore. And I'll be able to just tolerate. Because I do think there does need to be layers. Like not everyone's going to deserve to be in one of the more intimate layers of your life. Some people just aren't going to deserve that.
That ding, 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 ding. There is a tiny group, and I actually had a yoga teacher. Her name was Wendy Cook, who talked about that. There should be a tiny group of people who know your stuff. And before that and the other work that I had done on myself, everybody was in my group. You could
oversharing.
Yeah, I wanted to be wanted. So anybody who wanted to be in the group. Yeah. So now my group is this big. I can name the 3 people on my hands this big. This is all the people that get any vulnerable part of me whatsoever.
I think that's good. That's good because now the more people you have in your circle that you share everything with, the more likely there'll be problems with one of them or some of them. But when you keep it at a little bit of a distance, those kinds of things don't come up nearly as much. It's like the expression, you'd rather have 4 quarters and 100 pennies kind of thing.
Yeah, because Brene Brown says only certain people should know your shame stories. So where I used to tell everybody, my stories, 3 people get my shame stories now. And I can be vulnerable and they will be vulnerable back with me. I get their stories too. And that reciprocates and allows me to practice relationships and practice healing myself. And the other thing that I was thinking of that you were saying is I found the more work I do on myself and the more I change, the people around me change. I don't know if it's imaginary, but I really do believe this is true, that the more I heal, the people around me, the closest family members that I've been with my whole life, they let me change and they change too. It's very odd, but I have to hang on tight and stay in my truth and keep doing the work of looking at myself over and over and over again. And when I keep looking at myself and don't look at them, that is when the people around me change with me.
Well, it's like the energy thing. And energy is contagious. And Jim Carrey, I think he said something along the lines of, when he was around, it would bring out the best versions of other people. And so I do think there are certain people that have an energy that it's like a perfect union of a lot of things where they're able to be fun without provoking like jealousy, without making things toxic. But everyone is like, my uncle's one of these people where everyone is just like the best version of themselves around him. He brings out a version in them that doesn't really have insecurities. Like they just feel comfortable being them. And so he does change people because people act differently around him than they do around other people. So I agree, there are certain people out there, and maybe anyone could have this capability, but the better they do, the better people around them can do too. I believe that.
You know what I think it is?
What's that?
Again, totally my opinion. I think it's when people are being their true selves. It gives everybody else the permission to be their true selves.
I've heard that too. Like there's a guy named Joey Diaz, when they're just so unapologetically themselves that people just go with it. And it takes a lot of work to get there. Now, I do think some people are more born with it, where it seems like they've been that way their whole lives. But they just have this thing where, like, I'm not sure if triggers is the right word. It's filter. That's what it is. They just like no filter. They're just them. Boom. They don't think about who they're going to offend. They don't think about, oh, what's this person going to think about this? They're just them, which there could be other problems with that, of course. But they're just so unapologetically them that it gives others the permission to be unapologetically themselves. And it's rare people that are like that, but they're great people to be around. And you also mentioned the shame story thing too. that's a big one. That's a trust exercise, so to speak, because there's people who I've shared some shame with that they've tried to weaponize it, and I hate that. And those are people that I do the love from afar thing. If you've done that, you like weaponize things that I felt ashamed about. That's a no-fly zone, if you ask me. But there's other people that you share that stuff with. They would never dream of doing that. They would never dream of doing that. And then they'd be willing to share their stuff too. So those are just like, as you talk about this stuff, I see like how it's portrayed itself in my life. And I say, oh yeah, this person did that, the shame stuff, but other people didn't. But the people who weaponize it, that's rare though. That's a rare type of person that will do that.
A very hurting person.
Well, Dr. Romney was talking about that the other day. She said, oh, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And she was saying she doesn't buy that. She was saying that hurt reactive people without empathy hurt people.
Oh.
But hurt.
I definitely think it's like hurt people that aren't looking at themselves.
Yeah, so reactive with a little less on the empathy side. Because there are. Go on.
Listen to this concept. I find this interesting. I heard you can't be empathetic till you're willing to look at your stuff, because you can't empathize with someone unless you have understood and felt in their shoes. And the only way you can do that is if you're willing to look at your own junk.
I can see that. I mean, that's how when we look at it in our own lives, we can understand and we can have a lot more compassion and empathy for other things that people have going on. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
There you go. So, Melissa, I guess we can start wrapping up here a little bit. Is there anything else you wanted to share about your journey or anything that we touched on today so far?
I just love that you're doing this. I love that you're always out there doing different things for society and for the community. And I hope that everybody out there listens to their heart, go for it, do whatever it is that your heart is calling you to do, whether it's job or living where you live or just anything. Just go do it.
Amen. So, Melissa, where can they, I don't know, do you have any social media or things you want people to follow or anything, or links towards your business?
I think, I'm not really getting on social media that much, so I'm not really going to share anything. I'm just going to be out there.
All right. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. You always have a great perspective and you bring a great energy everywhere you go. So thank you again very much for coming on.
Thank you, Jared.
All right. You have a good one.
You too.